Hi folks, in this episode we're going to be talking about Once in a Lifetime by Talking Heads. I don't know if I have a favorite song, but if I did have one, this would probably be it. I just find it endlessly interesting, inspiring, energizing, mysterious, kind of frustrating, but that frustration of not understanding it keeps it from getting boring. It's a puzzle I can't solve, but it's just so fun trying to solve it, like life, right? It's an extremely weird song and a very simple one, yet a very unusual one. We'll talk about where it came from, its various sources of inspiration, how it was put together, how it was later performed, some covers, samples, and remixes, and then we'll try to get at why the song is so meaningful, in spite of being, on the surface of it, totally meaningless.
You may find yourself living in a shotgun shack, and you may find yourself in another part of the world, and you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile, and you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here?
Once in a Lifetime, it's full of contradictions. It's a pop song, but it's very artsy. It's accessible in the sense that you don't need much vocal ability to sing it. Like, I've done it at karaoke, and all it really requires you to do is be self-confident and willing to yell. My kids understood it upon first hearing it when they were very little immediately, but it's also been the focus of like an enormous amount of critical attention. It wasn't a commercial hit in the US when it first came out, but it's, I would say, the most iconic and widely known Talking Head song at this point. It's definitely the one that's kind of saturated the collective unconscious most deeply. I predict that 100 years from now, if we're still listening to anything from this period, that this song might be one of the things that persists. According to Secondhand Songs, Once in a Lifetime is the second most covered Talking Head song after This Must Be the Place, Naive Melody. People have sung it in Spanish, Greek, and Wolof. It's been performed by Kermit the Frog. According to WhoSampled.com, it's by far the most frequently sampled Talking Head song. I keep seeing books whose titles refer to it. There's You May Ask Yourself by Dalton Conley, Same as It Ever Was by Claire Lombardo, and This Is Not My Beautiful Life by Victoria Fedden. And I've even seen people with tattoos referring to it. So why? Why is it so good? Why is it so good? Why does it work so well? I don't know, but maybe we'll figure it out together. Once in a Lifetime is on Talking Heads' album Remain in Light, which was produced by Brian Eno. It's the third album that he produced with the band, and he was massively influential on them. Their early songs are very dense and action-packed and full of harmonic surprises and changes in texture, and they're just kind of jagged and unpredictable.
I see the clouds that move across the sky. I see the wind that moves the clouds away. It moves the clouds over by the building. I pick the building that I want to live in. I smell the pine trees and the peaches in the woods. I see the pine cones that fall by the highway. That's the highway that goes to the building. I pick the building that I want to live in. It's over
Brian Eno encouraged them to lean into this more kind of groove-oriented side of them, to open things up and stretch things out. So, for example, when he produced their cover of Take Me to the River by Al Green, he convinced them to do it extremely slowly, like much more slowly than they had been playing it live. And he added this very tripped out reverb and added these little kind of intermittent plonky organ notes, just these little dabs of sound that are almost unmusical, but they create like this sonic atmosphere, this very distinct sonic atmosphere.
I don't know why I love it like I do. All the trenches you put me through. Take my money, my cigarettes. I haven't seen the worst of it yet. I wanna know, can you tell me I love to stay? Take me to the river, drop me in the water. Take me to the river. Dip me in the water, wash me down, wash it down.
Eno recommended that the band listen to some Fela Kuti because he thought, quite correctly, that Fela Kuti was making the most exciting music in the world at that point. David Byrne has said that Zombie is one of his favorite Fela Kuti songs.
Zombie, oh zombie,
Zombie, oh zombie,
zombie, oh zombie,
zombie, oh zombie,
zombie not go unless you tell him to go.
zombie,
Zombie not go stop unless you tell him to stop.
zombie,
Zombie not go turn unless you tell him to turn.
zombie,
Zombie not go think unless you tell him to think.
Zombie.
Zombie, oh zombie,
Zombie,
zombie, oh zombie,
zombie, oh zombie,
zombie not go unless you tell him to go.
zombie,
Zombie not go stop unless you tell him to stop.
zombie,
Zombie not go turn unless you tell him to turn.
zombie,
Zombie not go think unless you tell him to think.
Zombie.
Zombie, oh zombie,
zombie, oh zombie,
zombie, oh zombie,
zombie, oh zombie.
Tell him to go straight. Na joro jara joro. No break, no jam, no sense. Na joro jara joro.
If you're familiar with Remain in Light, you can see how much it owes to this music. You have these very dense, heavily layered grooves on a single chord, a lot of rhythm, like a lot of layers playing these repetitive, kind of interlocking rhythmic patterns. And Eno thought that the best way that Talking Heads could channel some of this Fela Kuti energy would be not to write songs, but instead to just go into the studio together and have these open-ended jams and just kind of see what emerged. So Once in a Lifetime started out as one of these jams, and they actually released a version of this jam session in 2006 called Right Start.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And so the idea was, let's just record these jams and then we'll go back to them later, find the best parts, create some like arrangements just by muting and unmuting parts to say, if we just take out the keyboards for 8 bars, that could be a verse. And if we take out the guitar for this other 8 bars, that could be the chorus, right? So it's the same continuous groove, just with like stuff entering and exiting, which is much more similar to the way that you write a pop song in 2025 than the way you did it typically in 1980. Here's a really fun fact about this jam session. Apparently, Robert Palmer was there playing some guitar and percussion. Robert Palmer is the guy who had a bunch of hits in the 80s with songs that sound nothing like Talking Heads at all, like Addicted to Love, for example. But, just because his music is different from theirs, I guess doesn't mean that they can't be friends. So yeah, I don't know if he made it onto the final track, but he was definitely part of the jam session. That's pretty cool. Tina Weymouth came up with the bass line. Apparently during the jam, Chris France kind of yelled this rhythm at her and she came up with the notes. And she was deliberately trying to keep it as simple as possible just because it was like this very dense, heavily layered thing going on with a lot of different people playing. And she just wanted something that would leave space for the cacophony that surrounded her, in her words. While this bass line is extremely simple, it's pretty strange. So the whole song is one endless D chord until the end. Tina Weymouth is playing the notes F sharp and A. Okay, so F sharp is the third of the D chord and A is the fifth of the D chord, but she never plays D, like she never plays the root of the chord. It's not unusual for a bass player to play the fifth. It's reasonably common for bass players to play the third, but like as decorations, not as like the main thing. And for a bass line to completely avoid the root of the only chord in the song for most of the song is just crazy pants. Like the whole foundation of the house is unstable as a result, but not that unstable because it's so repetitive, right? And it very quickly becomes predictable. To fight this bass line, we've got Jerry Harrison's synth burble, this kind of texture that he's playing. He's playing the notes D, G, and A. That implies a D sus4 chord. So we've got sus4 in the synth burble, and yet we have the third underneath it in the bass. That is a pretty harsh conflict. And it's just the fact that the groove is so repetitive and so rhythmically satisfying that you don't really notice that harmonically anything is amiss, but it is definitely strange and unsettling when you start to think about it. There's definitely some studio manipulation going on, in addition to whatever kind of echo or reverb or delay is layered on top of the synth burble. It sounds to me like there's some echo on the drums. Chris France's basic pattern is eighth notes, hi-hats on the eighth notes. But then there's this echo or this delay that creates like an implicit 16th note pattern. Let's talk about David Byrne's, shall we say, unique vocal delivery. Some people find it annoying. It's definitely unconventional. I love it, but yeah, it's so weird, right? Like, where does it come from?
And you may ask yourself, how do I work this? And you may ask yourself, where is that large automobile? And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful house. And you may tell yourself, this is
He had been speak singing on Talking Head songs for a while at this point.
Think of London, a small city, dark, dark in the daytime. People sleep in the daytime. If they want to, I'm checking them out, I got it figured out.
The thing that he got interested in around this time was preachers, not just Christian preachers, but all kinds of religious leaders. So televangelists for sure, but also like the Islamic call to prayer, any kind of religious person getting into a trance. Also these sort of religion adjacent figures like politicians. He was really interested in this sort of like intensity and this kind of fevered quality that these people could reach with their voices.
And you may ask yourself, how do I work this? And you may ask yourself, where is that large automobile? And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful house. And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful wife.
At the same time that they were working on Remain in Light, David Byrne and Brian Eno were also working on My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. And for their track, The Jezebel Spirit, they were going to have this funk groove with an evangelist on top of it. And the one who they wanted to use is this woman, Kathryn Kuhlman. They wanted to use a recording of her performing an exorcism. I can't find that recording, but this is a recording of her recounting her first major spiritual experience.
We sat there awed, and the glory of the Lord was on that face. It was beautiful. Perhaps for 15 minutes or more, the perfection of that voice and the perfection of the sound of that music. I was learning. I was seeing. The Holy Spirit. I was witnessing something I had never known before.
Now, unfortunately, they couldn't get permission to use her voice on the album, so for the Jezebel Spirit, they had to use somebody else.
Jezebel, spirit of destruction, spirit of grief, I bind you with chains of iron. I bind you here and let be bound in heaven. Loosen your hold and come out of her now. Start blowing out, sister. Out, Jezebel, come out now. Go ahead. Out in the name of Jesus. Come on, destruction. Come on, destruction. Come on, grief. Jezebel, you're going to listen to me. Jezebel, go ahead, sister. Keep blowing. Jezebel, I banned you. She was intended by God to be a virtuous woman. You have no right there. Her husband is the head of the house. Out, Jezebel. Out. Out. In Jesus' name.
Eno says that he came up with the chorus melody, da 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 da, but David Byrne wrote all of the lyrics.
Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again. After the money's gone, once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. And you may ask yourself, how do I work this?
One thing that makes David Byrne's speak singing so compelling to listen to is its inherently melodic content.
Same as it ever was. 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 Word dissolving.
To demonstrate that, I've taken the vocals from the bridge and I put auto-tune on them. So I just tuned all his pitches to the closest notes in D Mixolydian mode.
Same as it ever was. 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 Same as it ever was.
And then I transcribed them into notation.
Same as it ever was. 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 same as it ever was.
And when I play back the transcribed version on top of the original recording, it really does sound like he's singing, doesn't it?
Same as it ever was. 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 Word dissolving?
The boundary between speaking and singing is pretty porous. All spoken language has a strong melodic component to it. You use melody, that is pitch and timing, to convey all kinds of information. For example, punctuation. If I go up at the end of my sentences, it's like I'm asking a question. And if I go down at the end of my sentences, it's like I'm using a period. And if I talk louder and go down more definitely at the end of my phrases, then it sounds like exclamation points. But we also use rhythm and pitch to convey emotion, and regional dialects are as much about pitch and timing as they are about the pronunciation of the vowels and the consonants. Now, there are some languages like Mandarin Chinese where the pitch of the word literally affects its meaning. English isn't that way, but even in English, the musical aspects of language do a huge amount of communicative heavy lifting. A scientist named Diana Deutsch did a famous experiment. It's called the speech-to-song illusion, where she had people listen to a little snippet of recorded speech.
The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible.
And then she had them listen to one little segment of that speech repeatedly.
But they sometimes behave so strangely. They sometimes behave so strangely. 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 So strangely. So strangely. So strangely. So strangely.
It does start to sound like singing after a while, doesn't it? And then when you listen back to the phrase in its original context, doesn't it sound like this person just burst into song for one line?
The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible.
It's pretty remarkable. And all that happened was you had to listen to the phrase enough times to lose interest in the semantic meaning of it and start paying attention to the sonic qualities of it. And those sonic qualities, right, the pitch and the rhythm, are always there. You just don't normally attend to them consciously. But as soon as you do attend to them consciously, yeah, they jump right out at you. And so one way to get yourself to attend to them consciously is just hear them repeated. And I don't know if David Byrne is doing this on purpose by chanting same as it ever was over and over again, but it certainly does have that effect for me where the phrase just becomes meaningless through the repetition and then the melodic aspects of it jump out at you. Speaking of weird effects that you get from repeating phrases of spoken language, in verse 3, the lyrics get chopped up into a bunch of tape loops. So the lyrics get kind of fragmented into this chaos of loops. It's pretty weird.
Water dissolving and water removing. There is water at the bottom of the ocean. Under the water, carry the water. Remove the water at the bottom of the ocean. Water dissolving and water removing.
This is pretty clearly an homage to Steve Reich, specifically It's Gonna Rain, which is one of Brian Eno's core aesthetic influences.
He began to warn the people. He said, after all, it's going to rain after all. For 40 days and for 40 nights. And the people didn't believe him. And they began to laugh at him. And they began to mock him. And they began to say, it ain't going to rain. It's gonna rain, 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 it's gonna rain,
At the end of the song, Jerry Harrison plays this chord progression on the organ, this D, C, G.
Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Look where my hand was. Time isn't holding up. Time isn't after us. Same as it ever was. 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 Here a twister comes. Here comes the twister. Same as it ever was.
He says that he got it from a Velvet Underground song called What Goes On. The crazy thing is, while he's playing D, C, and G, Tina Weymouth is still just playing F sharp and A, and F sharp doesn't fit under C or G at all. And like A clashes a little bit more gently, but it still clashes. It's really wild. The chorus melody, it's pretty much just arpeggiating a D chord, and it goes to the 4 a couple of times. That little keyboard part under the bridge, under Same As It Ever Was, is pretty much just arpeggiating the D chord. The guitar part under the chorus is pretty much just arpeggiating the D chord. It's so simple. There's so little information in it. And yet the components do kind of fight each other and coexist uneasily. Also, the instruments are pretty out of tune with each other. And I wonder if this is the result of a little bit of tape manipulation, or if it's just, analog instruments sometimes go out of tune as they heat up, and that's just part of analog life. And it's not like a problem exactly, but it does contribute to the sort of dreamy wooziness of the whole thing. It's interesting to listen to live versions of the song. It seems like it would be easy to do because it's so simple. You do kind of need a lot of people. So, Talking Heads in the early 80s, as they toured, started adding more people. Like they added Bernie Worrell playing keyboards, and they added Steve Scales as percussionist, a couple of backup singers, the Brides of Funkenstein, another guitarist, first Adrian Belew, and then Alex Weir. Because you do need a lot more layers to carry a song like Once in a Lifetime. Here's a version from 1982 on the album. The name of this band is Talking Heads.
You may find yourself living in a shotgun shack. You may find yourself in another part of the world. You may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile. You may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife. You may ask yourself, well, how did I get here?
Here's a version from Stop Making Sense in 1983.
You may find yourself living in a shotgun shack. You may find yourself in another part of the world. You may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile. You may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife. You may ask yourself, well, how did I get here?
And here's a much more recent version from David Byrne's American Utopia.
You may find yourself living in a shotgun shack. You may find yourself in another part of the world. You may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile. You may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife. You may ask yourself, well, how did I get here?
Quite a few people have tried to cover this song, and it's definitely not an easy thing to cover. Like, it's so specific to David Byrne and like the soundscape of the band as produced by Brian Eno. It's so difficult to convey that specific timbre of Jerry Harrison's keyboard playing, but that hasn't stopped people from trying. Sometimes people play it as like a straight up rock and roll song, which tends to be boring. Smashing Pumpkins play it as this kind of like doom metal.
And you may find yourself living in a shotgun shack. You may find yourself living in another part of the world. Yeah. You may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile. You may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife. And you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here?
It's kind of cool. It works. It's not really to my taste. I prefer my versions of this song to be more upbeat, but you can see where they came up with it. My favorite version is by Angelique Kidjo, who did an album-length Afrobeat cover of Remain in Light. And what I appreciate is that her version sounds very little like the original. Like, she changes the groove completely. She phrases the lyrics very differently. And in spite of the fact that it doesn't sound like the original at all, to me, that feels more true to the kind of ecstatic spirit of the original.
And you may find yourself living in a shotgun shack. And you may find yourself in another part of the world. And you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile. And you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife. And you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? Letting the days go by. Letting the days go by. Into the blue, oh yeah. Once in a lifetime. And you may ask yourself, how do I work this? And you may ask yourself, where is the...
You don't want to sound like David Byrne when you're doing that song. You want to sound like yourself. Yeah. I also really like the cover by PM Dawn. Rather than speak David Byrne's spoken parts, they just write a melody and sing it. I think that's cool.
You may find yourself living in a shotgun shack. You may find yourself in another part of the world. You may find yourself behind the wheels of a large automobile. You may find yourself with a beautiful house, with a beautiful wife. You may ask yourself,
I also want to shout out a jazz pianist named Mike Wofford, and he combines it with a jazz standard called Once in a Lifetime, which is a completely unrelated song. And you wouldn't think that you'd be able to convey the Talking Heads song Once in a Lifetime on solo piano, but he really does it, boy. Got this gospel flavor that I really appreciate. Hip-hop and dance producers really like that combination of the synth burble and the bass line. So here's DJ Chuck Chillout and Cool Chip with Rhythm is the Master from 1989.
Here we go. Now the introduction. It's Cool Chip Bronx with production. The instructions you must follow. So when you wake up tomorrow, you'll say, hey, the brother don't play. And like a smart man, you'll stay away. Betray, okay, that's a no-no. I'm all city, yes, and all metro. From the it up while I rhyme it up to the rhythm. Cause getting paid, that's how I'm living. Now what I'm giving, go ahead and write. Watch the mic explode like dynamite and like kryptonite. I won't stop talking, and when you see me face to face, keep walking. Cause I'm stalking, raps who play me close. Step back or catch a rap overdose. Well, I display and relate the sound you crave. The rhythm is the master, and I'm just a
Here's Is There Anybody Out There by Bassheads from 1991, which combines Once in a Lifetime with Africa Bombata, which I think is super cool. Here's Memphis Bleak and Jay-Z with All Right from 1998, and they slow the Talking Head sample way, way down, and they combine it with this very cool Kraftwerk sample.
Come down if you wanna bounce, ball if you wanna ride, play if you wanna play, floss if you wanna floor. It's alright, you heard? It's alright, holla back. We get ill if you wanna ill, smoke if you wanna smoke, kill if you wanna kill, low if you wanna low. It's alright, you heard? It's alright, yeah, I need a hoe in my life, though. Blowing my dice so we can make our point twice, then skate out of town. I need that, glowing my ice, E-class. Ladies screaming jigger, you know we needs that. Flowing our life, Jesus. They ain't seeing me, holding the mic. So in your life, you'll find MCs so impolite in me. I'm so in the nice, got cats on the corner nice. Don't me and Jigger be flowing alike? Nah, not in your life, ain't nobody popping like.
My favorite remix of the song is by Gigamesh from 2012. I especially love the way that he handles Here Comes the Twister.
Same as it ever was. 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 Here comes the twister.
And I also really love the Reflex revision from 2017. The Reflex is this French DJ, Nicolas Laugier, and he only uses sounds that are found within the original multi-track stems. So he doesn't add anything. All he does is chop up and rearrange the pieces that are already in there. And yeah, I love the concept. I love the execution. I think the whole thing works great.
Same as it ever was. 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 Water dissolving and water removing. There is water at the bottom of the ocean. Under the water, carry the water. Remove the water, remove the water, remove the water, remove and water,
I adore this song. My only complaint with it is that it's too short, like way too short. Ted Gioia says that if you really want to put people in like a transportive, ecstatic state, your piece of music needs to be at least 10 minutes long. And when I saw American Utopia on Broadway with my wife, you know, when they played Once in a Lifetime, I mean, it practically levitated the building off its foundations. It was so rapturous, but it was over in 4.5 minutes just when I was like really starting to get into it. And, you know, what I would love is for David Byrne or somebody to play it for like half an hour, the way that Fela Kuti would, right? because you can just have the groove ride out for as long as you want. You know, you can have your percussionists do their thing. You can have instrumental solos. You can just improvise more lyrics for it, right? Like once you're sort of in that state, it doesn't seem like it would be that difficult to just make up more words like, you may find yourself standing at your kitchen sink. You may find yourself cracking eggs into a pan. You may say to yourself, why do we eat these eggs of the chickens? You know, it just writes itself. I think that would be a real gift to humanity. Me and my wife and kids are going to go see David Byrne in September at Radio City Music Hall. And Mr. Byrne, if you're listening, please consider it. I think everybody would really dig it. David Byrne has said that the lyrics to this song do not mean anything, that the lyrics to most of his songs don't mean anything. He just comes up with a rhythm and then he just fits syllables to it using phrases that pop into his head for no reason or that he sees on like billboards or magazine covers or whatever. And the whole point is for them to be meaningless so that you, the listener, can just kind of project or impute whatever meaning you see fit onto them. And many people have. So, you know, I've seen a lot of interpretations of the song as being like a critique of American capitalism. Although weirdly, Brian Eno doesn't hear it as critical. He hears it as celebratory, like he hears it as a joyful embracing of these things. People have found references to the Bible in there. People have seen it as a metaphor for various kinds of mental illness, specifically schizophrenia. I mean, it's not like a completely blank page for you to project your own ideas onto, but because it's so opaque and because it's so kind of open-ended, yeah, it really does invite interpretation. And it would be one thing if it was all just completely obscure and impenetrable, but David Byrne also likes cliches. So the phrase once in a lifetime, for example, it's such a cliche that there must be like 50 other songs by other people named once in a lifetime that are totally unrelated, yeah? By using that phrase, he's kind of tapping into all of your existing associations with that phrase, whatever those might be. And same thing with Same As It Ever Was, right? That's not quite as heavily used a cliche as Once in a Lifetime, but it, you know, it is a phrase that existed before he got to it. And many people coming to this song have some prior association with it. So yeah, it's like whatever you bring into the room with, you know, whoever you have heard say The Same As It Ever Was before you heard David Byrne say it, right? You're bringing that to the table and he clearly is like completely fine with that. I think that if the song did have some secret meaning that you could ferret out, like if it was a code that you could decrypt, if it was like, you know, a secret message like the Da Vinci Code, it would be very interesting figuring out the solution to the puzzle. But then as soon as you figured out the solution to the puzzle, it would just stop being interesting. Like it would still be a fun song and everything, but it just wouldn't be nearly as like gripping and compelling as it is, you know, no matter how many times you hear it. At least for me, like I never get bored of it. I've remixed it myself many, many times. I've tried playing it on the guitar. I've never done it in public, but I mean, I've done it at karaoke and it's amazing at karaoke. I've played like a remix of it in front of people and it's like a fun song to remix. The multi-track stems are out there. They're pretty easy to find, you know, and there are instrumental sections that it's easy to loop up if you want to put your own vocals on there. There's an analogy here to video games where, you know how like a video game is super, super fun until you beat it and then, you know, you've kind of figured out the algorithm and then all you're doing is executing the algorithm and then it's no fun anymore. And the games that really stay interesting for years and years and years are the ones that are not beatable. So for example, Tetris, like there's no way to win. You always lose, always, always, always. But ironically, that is what keeps it from being boring because you're just like, ooh, but maybe I could get like a little bit further, a little bit further. There's something in Once in a Lifetime that's kind of reminiscent of a Zen koan where it's intentionally nonsensical. And by deliberately contemplating something so nonsensical, it just kind of clears your mind. Like you let go of these logical feedback loops that you get stuck into. You're able to like step outside of them and just recognize their absurdity and kind of let things go. But it's not gibberish. I mean, you know, Talking Heads have also embraced literal gibberish. So there's their song Izimbra from Fear of Music, which is a Hugo Ball poem that is literal nonsense syllables. And that song is fun and everything, but for me, Once in a Lifetime is a lot more interesting because it almost means things, right? Like every individual phrase in the song is sensible English, and it's like almost on the edge of referring to specific things. I feel like if it was just like Zimbra, if it was complete nonsense, then that gets boring quickly too, because like there's just nothing to hook into emotionally. And Once in a Lifetime, the emotions are contradictory and unspecific, but they're definitely there, right? There's anxiety and there's hope, there's yearning, there's like curiosity and wonder, there's a certain amount of depression and despair, like all that stuff coexists. So it's not so much that it resists emotions as it just gives you a lot of emotions to choose from. And you can kind of come at the song from a lot of different emotional vantage points and intellectual vantage points and, find something in there that resonates. And, it's the fact that it's so open-ended, like it's so non-linear that it's just this open-ended loop of just D forever. And yeah, at the end, it does go into this chord progression, D, C, and G. But that is also not a very linear chord progression. Like that's pretty much just like a verticalization of D Mixolydian mode. Like it's more of a kind of continuous vibe than a narrative of harmonic tension resolution. Yeah. And the fact that Tina Weymouth doesn't have to change her bass line under this chord progression tells you just how kind of not functional and how not linear these chords really are. It's a pretty difficult song to play because it's so simple. Like, what do you play over it? Like, do you just kind of find a pattern and lock into it? Or do you just kind of jam and improvise? Or, do you try to not play specific notes at all, but just create a texture like Jerry Harrison? Or, if you're Talking Heads or, David Byrne's solo bands, like you do all of those things. Yeah. It really does support these widely divergent approaches to arranging it and performing it. My kids love David Byrne. They love Talking Heads. They love this song in particular, although it's not their favorite Talking Head song. They really like Burning Down the House, Slippery People. They really like Don't Worry About the Government. They like stuff that's a little bit more songy than this, but they definitely appreciate this. And okay, so yeah, my kids are little Brooklyn hipsters, right? But it does make sense that young children would enjoy Talking Heads because they're is something very childlike about their quasi-nonsensical lyrics. I will say that my kids definitely prefer present-day David Byrne to 80s David Byrne. They like those Talking Head songs from the 80s, but they find the whole like post-punk kind of anxious, bug-eyed, sweaty energy a little frightening and off-putting. They really like David Byrne in his kind of white-haired grandpa, Mr. Rogers era. They prefer his affect in American Utopia to his affect in Stop Making Sense. And they definitely prefer how stuff sounds as played by the American Utopia band. And that makes sense, right? Like when I was, 25 years old, I definitely related a lot more to Talking Heads of the Stop Making Sense era because I was like anxious and kind of bugged out and sweaty. But, now in middle age with my life much more under control, both externally and internally, yeah, I can see how 80s Talking Heads can be kind of daunting and 2020s David Byrne is just a lot more approachable. Talking Head songs are actually pretty friendly for beginner musicians, like, especially these more kind of minimalist groove-based ones, because it's not that difficult to learn how to play the Once in a Lifetime bass line. It's not that difficult to learn how to arpeggiate DGA, DGA, DGA. Burning Down the House is not too difficult to play. Slippery People is really easy, just A minor the whole time. A lot of these songs, to really do them with their full layered complexity you hear on the live albums is challenging, but just to convey the basics of the song, yeah, is pretty accessible. And there's something really great about these highbrow, artsy, challenging songs that are so simple that a beginner pianist or a beginner guitarist can play them. That's definitely something that I aspire to. I'm writing a bunch of educational music right now for elementary and middle school bands with my friend Heather Fortune, and we're very much going for this kind of Talking Heads vibe of these simple, repetitive ideas that are still rich and engaging, that create these attractive grooves that aren't boring after a lot of repetitions. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's a pretty neat trick. And, Talking Heads are very smart to be drawing on Fela Kuti and Parliament Funkadelic. I guess the Velvet Underground, I don't myself love the Velvet Underground, but I can see why people do, because again, you get this like super minimal, seemingly simplistic ideas that are supportive of this much more open-ended, divergent, challenging, and unexpected lyrical themes. Yes, you draw people in with these fun grooves, and then you just sort of like set their minds loose into outer space with your lyrics. That's a thing that little kids definitely enjoy, and it's certainly a thing that adults enjoy. I just think it's remarkable how good Talking Heads are at reaching people across age groups and across generations like this. And yeah, I appreciate them. And I am like really amped to see what David Byrne is going to do at Radio City in September. So yeah. Once in a lifetime. It's a beautiful song. Thank you very much for listening.